All right, let's jump right in. So often we focus on learning what's right, how to think, how to reason. But today, we're kind of turning a corner. This isn't just about knowing anymore. It's about learning how to act, but to act faithfully. Without rushing in, without pride, and without accidentally making things worse. That is the whole idea behind the Civic Leadership Practicum. And we're going to break down exactly what that looks like.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. We've got 4 main parts. First, we'll talk about what this is not, which actually helps define what it is. Then we'll get into why wisdom has to come before action. It's so important. After that, we'll walk through the actual practical steps, the path of service. And finally, we'll talk about your very first assignment, just observing.
Okay, so to really get what this different approach to community service is all about, it really helps to start by clarifying what it's not, because it kind of pushes back against a lot of the common ideas we have about what it means to get involved.
So on one hand, you have the usual playbook, right? Political activism, protests, issue advocacy, all of it looking for a quick fix. But this approach offers a totally different posture. It's small, it's local, voluntary, and nonpartisan. And this is key. It's educational and guided by mentors. It's really about service, not about control.
And this really gets us to the core question that this whole thing is trying to answer. How do you, as a free person, actually help in a free society without accidentally making things worse or becoming part of the problem yourself? It's a huge challenge, and it's the puzzle we're trying to solve here.
This brings us to the absolute bedrock of this philosophy. Wisdom has to come before action. It's this idea that even our best intentions, our purest motives, can totally backfire if they aren't guided by a real, deep understanding of what's going on.
I mean, we've all seen this, right? Heck, maybe we've even done it. We see a problem, and that first impulse is to just jump in and fix it. But this practicum argues that that very impulse, as good as it feels, can actually be the source of the problem. It's a call to just pause. So before you do anything at all, this is the very first question you have to ask. It forces you to look around and realize, hey, I'm not the first person to see this need. Who is already on the ground, quietly doing the work? The next critical question is all about, well, whose job is this, really? Is this a problem for the city council, a church, a local nonprofit, maybe just a neighborhood group? Figuring out who has the rightful authority in a situation stops us from stepping on toes and overstepping our bounds.
And finally, you have to ask the really hard one. What could go wrong here? What are the second and third order effects if we do this? Thinking through potential harm isn't about being afraid to act. It's what mature, wise leadership actually looks like.
When you start asking these questions, it naturally leads to a certain posture. It's a way of being in your community. It means you're someone who listens way more than they speak. You have genuine respect for the people who've been doing the work for years. You accept your own limits, and you serve without needing a pat on the back. This internal attitude is actually more important than any specific thing you do.
Okay, so that's the why, the whole philosophy behind it. But what about the how? How do you actually do this? Well, this isn't just some vague idea. It's a structured, repeatable process designed to put these principles into practice.
And look, this path is step by step for a reason. You start quietly by simply observing. From there, you can identify a real need. But wait, before you act, you have to ask who should be acting. Then you figure out the nature of the problem. Only then do you design and this word is important, a modest response, not some grand plan to save the world. The goal here isn't speed, it's wisdom.
And here's the best part. You don't have to walk this path alone. Mentorship is woven right into the fabric of this whole process. But look at the definition here. A mentor is not a boss. They're not there to give you answers. Their job is to help you slow down, ask better questions, and stay true to these principles. Because let's be honest, wisdom is almost always learned with other people. So let's land the plane. Let's bring everything we've talked about home to your very first assignment. It all starts with one simple but incredibly powerful action: quiet attention. And I gotta tell you, this is so countercultural. The very first instruction is basically to do nothing, or to be more precise, to not fix anything. You're not going to propose a solution, you're not going to organize a meeting, you will simply observe. Why? Because most of the harm done in our communities is caused by people who just didn't take the time to understand what was already going on. So what are you looking for? Well, here are your guideposts. Look for the quiet helpers. Try to see beneath the surface to the needs that aren't so obvious. Look for places where people are just cooperating without being forced to. And that last one, wow, what frustrates you and why? That question tells you as much about yourself as it does about the community. Okay, so here's the plan of action, crystal clear. First, you pick one local setting. Could be a school board meeting, a park, a food pantry, whatever. Your only job is to watch and listen. And this is important. You do not intervene. You don't give advice, and you definitely don't post about it online. You just write down what you saw, and then you bring that reflection to your mentor. It's an exercise in pure discipline.
And that brings us to the final thought, the big question that sits at the heart of this entire thing. In a world that just screams for speed and immediate results, this approach asks us to choose a different path. Because at the end of the day, a healthy community isn't built by those who act the fastest, but by those who have taken the time to act the wisest. So, which will it be?